Good afternoon, Hill Country Comic Con. How you doing? Good. Show been going well for you? How many of you been to a panel so far? Okay, how are we doing so far on that front? I mean, I'm a little bit selfish asking because I've been the jerk on stage each time. Everything going well? A few of you are comic book fans, I hope. Okay, good. You showed up to the right panel. This is Making Comics the Marvel Way, with three of our superstar artist guests that we are thrilled to have at this inaugural instance of the show. Let's go ahead and introduce them and give them a round of applause. Here to my immediate left, Mr. Sean McKeever. To his left, Carlo Berberi. And all the way there on the end, last but certainly not least, the co-creator of Howard the Duck, Val Mayerik. And when our esteemed fearless leader, Mr. Vo Nguyen, said, hey, let's put together some programming for this, I want a really good comics panel, I said, okay, well, who do we have? And when I saw that we had these three gentlemen who have all worked for Marvel Comics, but worked for Marvel Comics in different capacities, different times, and have different stories to tell, I figured we might just get some really cool anecdotes out of this. So if this doesn't go well, it's all your fault. To start things off, not necessarily everybody who works in comics started out as a comics fan when they were a kid. Maybe they were into movies, or they were into drawing, but they weren't necessarily into comics. But if you were a comics fan when you were a kid, where did that start for you, Sean?
I don't know exactly how it started, but I know it began because I saw a Spider-Man comic in a pharmacy, and I guess I was drawn to the character, and I begged my parents to buy it for me. And that was an issue of Spidey Super Stories back in the 70s, and I was instantly hooked. And I learned to read comics from an early age because my parents would read them to me, but I wanted to read them myself. So that's how I got into it. And aside from a couple breaks, I've never left. Always been a fan.
Carlo, how did you start out as a fan of comics?
Well, I start more into cartoons. I live in Monterrey, Mexico, so what you have there, it's the Super Friends, Superpowers, all the stuff, and of course the Spider-Man cartoon as well from the 70s, and that led me to go to and look for where they came from. So I don't remember my first comic. I just remember that my father just bought me like a bunch of comics books from Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Archie, and some that were made in Mexico with parchis. It's just like a boy band with girls, but they were all small guys, and it was started from there. It was so bizarre, but I actually liked it as well. And
going back to Super Friends, did you have a favorite character in the Super Friends that you liked the most?
Yeah, I guess Superman, and yeah, my first comic. I don't remember which issue or anything. The first one that I read because it was in front of it. It's a Superman comic book. So after that, but I like every single character. I learned about the Marvel superheroes after some time when I saw you remember the Captain America across his fighting shield? Yeah. I saw that. Who were these characters? And I didn't know it was made by Jack Kirby and of course Stan Lee. And when in Mexico you couldn't find those, so the first actual comic that I bought from Marvel was Torment for Spider-Man, the Todd McFarlane, and I was just blown away because I read Superman and all those comic books, and they were like really hard to draw like them. They were like really realistic style. When I saw Todd McFarlane, it was like, oh my God, you can do that in a comic book, so I can do comics, Of course, I started reading more for pencilers or artists, Jill Kane and Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, all those guys. So I started everything was incredible for me for how they managed to tell stories so well. That was my first introduction to comic books, a long one.
Val, were you into comics as a kid? Or if you weren't, I mean, what were you into?
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind is I'm a really old guy. And when I was, is this thing on? When I was a kid, there was no organized fandom. Comics were sold every place on little spinner racks in drugstores and pharmacies and department stores for 15 cents a piece. And I was reading what all the kids were reading, which was Carl Barks' Uncle Scrooge. I loved that stuff. And then when I approached maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, I started reading Superman. I wasn't a huge fan of Superman. I liked Sergeant Rock, the DC comic, war comic. I love Sergeant Rock, and I realized now the reason I liked it was because of Joe Kubert's art. I was not a developed artist yet at that time, but that art really appealed to me. And then my early college years, I began reading a little bit of Marvel stuff, the Silver Surfer, Conan the Barbarian, and it was the fantasy sword and sorcery stuff that really got me interested in comics. I never really followed the superheroes very much. I always thought that were kind of silly. Still do. Sorry.
Co-creator of a legendary superhero character thinks they're silly.
Yeah, well, but there were some black and white magazine comic publications back in the 70s. If any of you might, some of you might be aware of them. The Creepy, Eerie, Vampirella, Warren comics. They had a lot of Latin American artists showing up in there, artists from Spain and Europe, excellent artists. It was all black and white work, so there was all this gorgeous line work. And at the time, I really was into being, you know, I wanted to be an illustrator of some sort. I didn't really necessarily want to gravitate to comics. And I was very influenced by Esteban Maroto and San Julian. Those guys were just extraordinary artists. And then I just had a lucky break. I was able to get into the comic book business, which is a whole other story, which I think we'll probably cover later.
Well, actually, we're probably rolling straight into it, because everybody who's in comics, I found that even though some people have certain things in common with each other in terms of how they got into making comics, there's no, okay, I went to school for making comics and then I was handed my comic book job. It's stumbling backward into it, stumbling sideways into it. I mean, you had a bit of a different path in terms of where you thought you were going with your illustration work, and you ended up in comics, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, today you literally can go to the Kubert School and you can learn to do comics. They have comic book storytelling, narrative, illustration work in some art schools now. And there are alumni like, well, Kubert's sons, Adam and Andy Kubert. But when I got into the business, it was just purely right place, right time. The Johnny Romitas, Joe Kuberts, Jack Kirby's were getting older. People wanted to see something new. Suddenly along comes people in my generation, Rich Buckler, Barry Smith, Bernie Wrightson, Mike Kaluta, Craig Russell, myself, and
Bill Sienkiewicz, Walt Simonson.
Sienkiewicz came a little later, but yeah, Walt Simonson, Howie Chaykin, and we all had something different to offer, something that excited us and we wanted to bring to that business. And boom, the doors opened. When I got into Marvel, I mean, Marvel Comics, the offices were much bigger than this room. And there were no, of course, way pre-digital age. So it was just a beehive of activity. It was really exciting to go to the Marvel offices. And nobody cared about comics in those days. Nobody thought that they'd, be making multi-million-dollar movies out of comic book characters. So anybody could go up there. There was no security. You could just go up to the offices and, hi, who are you? I don't know. I just want to see what's going on, And there was all this original art lying around. Gil Kane, Jack Kirby, original art. The letterers were working on it. The editors were doing spelling corrections. It was really exciting. It was really interesting. And when I got into I was an art student at a really bad art college, and found out that a guy who used to work for Marvel, Dan Atkins, who was an inker and a really good artist back in the 50s, lived about 60 miles away from me. I drove down there, I said, look, I'm in my 4th year of a really piss-poor art school, excuse my language, And I said, I've got to do something. What can I do? And he said, I'll do an imitation of Dan. It won't matter but anybody that knows Dan knows I do a pretty good imitation. He goes, yeah, you better move down here with me. Come on in. Yeah, I'll work with you. I took all my work down there and showed Dan, and P. Craig Russell, who some of you may know who he is an extraordinary artist, an Eisner Award-winning artist, was also trying to get into the business. And we kind of just moved into Dan's place. And Dan taught us some storytelling, some basic drawing tricks for comics, sent our stuff up to Stan Lee, and Stan said, yeah, these guys are pretty good. Bring them in. Boom, it was that quick, that simple. My life changed. A lot of us luck. I mean, obviously we brought the goods to it. Craig and I could draw, or we had our strong points, but we still had a lot to learn. I discovered there was this thing, like these conventions. Even back then, there was organized fandom. I was astonished. I was astonished at how much these people knew about comics that I didn't know. I knew about the Silver Surfer and the Avengers, that was it. These guys knew stuff that went way back to the Little Nemo comics that were done in the 20s and 30s. I was astonished how much this world opened up to me, of all these illustrators. So that was it. That's what kind of got me in there. I was not, I guess the bottom line of what I'm trying to, what the crux of this is, I was not a fan who was dying to get into the business. I wanted to be an illustrator. And all illustrators want to work. You don't want to have to, work as a waiter and just do stuff in his spare time like actors do. If you get a chance to get your foot into some door, you do it. And I did. That's how it worked out for me. It was not my driving passion. Comics led me later on to do other kinds of illustration. It wasn't. I can't say it was a stepping stone because I was in the business a long time, but it was really. It was, and once I got into that world, I realized what an interesting world it was, and I still appreciate it. I mean, I still obviously, if I'm here, I'm still getting something from this, from the fans. I'm getting feedback from the fans, and that's all very gratifying. And it's just after this many years, I got my first job at Marvel in 1972. So after this many years of in that business. I have to say that it was certainly worth it. I spoke enough. Okay, go ahead.
Hearing you talk, but to let you shut up for a minute and catch your breath, Carlo. Did you look at wanting to get into comics as a job from an early age? At what point did you want to get into comics as a professional?
Well, as I said, my idea was to draw Disney movies, right? I tried to make the same thing because I live in Mexico. Even to get into comics living in Mexico, it's when I started it wasn't that easy. But I started learning what do you have to do, or how you can get into work into cartoons and all that stuff. And there's that's the point. I just started investigating to a certain point, and I said, no, I don't want to do animation because they have like the key animator and pretty much the filler, the guy who the key
guy
animator
who really breaks his arm drawing.
Yeah, the key animator does this and the last and that, and the filler has to draw all. So to get into that, first it's really hard to get into that. And then you have to work a lot, and it's not even your name in the screen. You're just a peon over there, so you get sacrificed to save the queen. So I said, so I turned into comic books, and that was around I was like 16 years old, and I saw, I think this is a better medium for me to. I always wanted to draw. It doesn't matter what I was gonna do, but I wanted to be like an illustrator, but more into something. I don't know the word. I wanted to show my stuff in a medium where I can show it to everyone else. Like comic books. Or
You didn't want to be invisible.
A popular medium, yeah. So I looked into comics, and I was a little disappointed at the beginning because I saw guys like Gil Kane and John Byrne and all those guys, and there's no way I'm gonna draw like that, because I knew that always my style was really cartoony, because of I wanted to draw cartoons. So it was like I was like in the middle, and then I saw Todd McFarlane. Oh my God, they can hire you to do that. So I started pushing myself, and back in those days, you didn't have Google, so you have to go and buy, to the library, which used to have, we just, and I took some books from, whatever it has, from Michelangelo, or all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Donatello and all those, which were really great artists. And I saw how a little bit what helped me more, and I think I have a little bit of me with my cartoony style, is Leonardo da Vinci, because he just did like a schema, like he just put apart every muscle, so I understood what was happening, and I didn't look too much because I didn't want to draw realistic as well, and that's how I start. And then I went into architecture school for two semesters. I didn't like it, but they teach me how to draw buildings, so which I took, and then I went to a really crappy art school as well. But they have architects in there. They have guys. The actual teachers were good. The system was just all over the place, really bad.
Was this in Mexico?
Yeah, in Monterrey, Mexico, where I live. I don't know in Mexico City, but in my city it just sucked. So, so I took all those stuff, and I started putting everything together into how to become a comic book artist. And then I learned about going to shows and showing your stuff. And you go to, I went to San Diego, which was the one that I knew that editors gonna be there. And at the beginning, San Diego wasn't like that. Today, they have people, but today it's just you can walk in there, and everything is like that you have to follow a line and do certain things to get into. You have to go to some place to get like a little ticket to go and see some editor who is gonna tell you, you're not ready. So you have to do a lot more. And my time, you just go, put yourself in a line, and there was an editor in there, and they show your stuff and tell you, you're not ready, and they give you some points. You do, what I did was, I'm not good at perspective. I'm not good at proportions with the muscles and everything. And I waited another year, practicing for another year, and it took me and did the same thing over and over again. Send a lot of samples, of course, through the years. A lot of rejection letters, which had like a little Spider-Man. I remember seeing the little Spider-Man. Oh, damn it!
I had a few of those.
Spider-Man still hates me.
And DC as well. And so when I was getting closer to what I knew that I could do my break into the U.S. comic books, because I did some independent comics in Mexico. Everything I did was for practice, and I am really stubborn. So I guess it's part of how you can get into comic books. You need to be really stubborn and practice and do it, and whatever. My family didn't understand. Are you gonna live more in Mexico? Are you gonna live in doodling? It's like, no way. So you can become an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, but never an illustrator, because they didn't understand. My father is an engineer, my brother is an engineer, so so it's like they were open the door and say, "Are you doodling again?" Oh my God, they just closed.
Could I just say one thing? That reminds me of when I came from a very blue-collar working-class family in Northeast Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, built entirely on steel mills. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and To the day she died, my grandmother thought I was a failure because I didn't keep a job at a GM assembly plant. This was their mentality. Nobody. I used to show my work around to some guys I worked with in some of them in the steel mills later on when I would meet them in a bar or something, and they say, "Wow, can you believe this? A guy lives here that, I mean, everybody here works for a living. Look at this guy. He's just goofing around." They just, the concept that people, I mean, they watch television, they go to movies, but they don't understand that people have to produce this. People make careers out of this. People study hard to do this stuff. So I know what you're talking about. There's just that thing that even if you are making money at it, you're still not really working.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is frustrating. You just finally have to just tell your family, look, this is what I do. You got to live with it.
Well, they understood that when I started buying cars and so
When you buy the mansion,
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, you're fine."
so they were like, oh, so that worked. Yeah, I told you. For 15 years. But then I just keep going to shows, and then I changed my mind and I start trying to, instead of going to just editor, because they have like 15 minutes to tell you you're not doing this well or that. So I went to artists and I told them, here's my stuff, can you check that out? Some artists are just mean or they were angry and they were, no, I don't do that. I'm like, okay, no problem. I just took my stuff and went to the next one, the next table. Or, well, in San Diego, it wasn't even a table. It was like a really close one. So he didn't show. And the next guy said, oh, of course. And they give me like the better points to get better. So again, I went to a show, and actually I'm really grateful because I met him one or twice as Art Adams. I show him my stuff the same way, like I've been doing that for 5 years or so. And he saw it and he liked it, and Mike Richardson, who is
Dark Horse.
Yeah, he was or is the president, or
Yeah, something like that. Still
Okay.
is, and just kind of has other people running.
So he was, Mike was talking to someone else, and Art started just screaming at him, "Hey, Mike, come on here. Like, wait a second. Hey, come on." So yeah, so he just come like right away because Art Adams, well, he's Art Adams. So so
You make other people wait for
Yeah.
Art Adams, make time for
So
art.
Mike just saw my stuff and it was, "Oh, do you have any Xeroxes?" And of course. Just give him the Xeroxes, and when I come back home Monday, I got a message from Randy Stradley, who is pretty much the second in command. I didn't know who Randy was. So he offered me a job. So I started in Dark Horse Presents, doing some small stuff, and that's where my career started.
That's where a lot of people, I think, these days don't have that opportunity, where you don't have anthologies like Dark Horse Presents, you don't have backup stories. I know, Val, some of your early work, variant stories in anthology books. Sean, what was your origin story of getting into comics? Was writing comics something that you wanted to do as part of a writing career specifically, or is it something that you came to as also being a comics fan and aspiring writer?
Well, I went to comic book school, and then they gave me my comic book job.
Well, there we go. He's disproved my.
It's funny because it's kind of an ongoing, it's an evolving answer every time I get asked this, because it makes me think back to my early formative years, and I always enjoyed entertaining in some way, whether it was like for my 6th or 7th birthday, I dressed up as Peter Criss from Kiss, and I did basically like karaoke of his solo album for all of my guests at my birthday party. And
Which made you the coolest kid.
yeah, right. And in grade school, I wrote and starred in plays for the class, and Like in 5th grade, I wrote a serialized sequel to the movie Halloween that would get me kicked out of school today, where basically I took turns killing different classmates in the story, and they let me actually every Friday.
Sean would be doing this panel from a padded cell.
Yeah, every Friday they my English teacher would let me read a chapter. Of course, I had to end it by saying it was all a dream. But I always had an interest in writing, and I always had an interest in writing comic books specifically. I remember one year for Christmas I made little comic books for my family. Like I remember one was a team up between Spider-Man and Snoopy. And
I mean, that would print money today.
right? Yeah, they should do it. Marvel, call me. And you know, I was always interested in doing it, and I sent my first writing submission to Marvel in high school, but I never thought of it like as a career. I just thought of it as, oh, this is something I really want to do. I got the acting bug as well early on, and high school kind of took me in that direction. I starred in a lot of the plays. I'm from a small town in northern Wisconsin, and I quit the hockey team my senior year to star in Macbeth, which is like unheard of. Like we were state champs the year before, and I left. But I went to college for theater, and after 5 semesters, I basically dropped out before I was kicked out. The only class that I didn't fail that last semester was screenwriting, and so I realized I don't want to be an actor. The realities of it are really scary. I don't want to work in theater. I wanted to be in movies, and the reality of that meant I was going to move to LA and be a barista, and that sort of thing, and I didn't like the idea of that. So I moved back in with my family and went to work at their hardware store, where I also sold comic books, believe it or not, in a True Value hardware store, and I got really serious about becoming a writer, and I would send pitches to Marvel. Back then, you could actually just mail them pitches, and they story submissions and stuff like that, and they would actually look at them. It's nothing like that now. But I would get the form letters back that you mentioned that had Spider-Man by John Romita on the front, swinging, and it was discouraging, but I kept at it. And what I realized at the time in the early '90s, there were a lot of great independent comics. I can think specifically of Stray Bullets, Strangers in Paradise, Hate. Those were all comics that were doing something more akin to what you would see in other storytelling medium. Whereas superheroes were pretty much the dominant thing. And I thought, well, what would I want to write about if not Spider-Man? And I came up with The Waiting Place, which was my series about growing up in a dead-end town, which I knew absolutely nothing about. Living in a town of 1,200 people that was just a tourist trap. So I wrote that series, and back in those days there was a vibrant comics community on CompuServe, which was back when you had to plug a cord into your computer that went to your phone line, and you would dial in to a long distance phone number, and well, for me it was long distance, and you get
back when we measured the internet in hours.
Yeah. Back when downloading a 6 megabyte file took 6 hours. And so I went to I met a lot of people on CompuServe. I met people through comic conventions, like going down to Chicago Comic-Con, and so somebody paired me with some artists who were also hungry to get some work, and I really liked their work, and they liked my work, and we said, well, let's do the first issue of this thing, and we'll try to find somebody to publish it. So we did that, and I took it to San Diego and went to every publisher I could think of, and they would take my black and white first issue, well, it was a black and white series anyway, but they would take my first issue and put it in this giant box of submissions, and it was another disheartening moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just like in this mountain this, of submissions. Like nobody will ever even return my, my info and get back to me. And then actually about a month after that show, I had a message on my machine from Dan Votto, who was the publisher of Slave Labor Graphics, best known for Milk and Cheese and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And he said, well, I read your first issue. I want to read number 2, so I guess I'll publish the thing. And that was in '96, and that was also at the time, like these two gentlemen, I was getting a small amount of work doing stories for an anthology called Negative Burn at Caliber Comics, and that was, it felt like forever back then, but that 5-year period is how I finally broke into where I had my own series.
Now there are college courses and entire undergraduate degrees in how to actually make comics and all that. We would be here all day if we were going to do a full workshop on putting one of these kinds of things together. But with the time that we have, I thought maybe we could get a little bit of specifically your time working for Marvel, working on Marvel products. Carlo, recently you were on Spider-Geddon, the sequel to the Spider-Verse crossover, written by Christos Gage. Was part of your early affection for Spider-Man something that made working on a project like that rewarding? What has made doing the work enjoyable for you? Hopefully it hasn't just been a paycheck.
Oh no, yeah. Wow. I love the idea. It was that's the thing. Every time I can, I just write Nick Blow is the editor in the Spider-Man. Hey, by the way, I'm free. Do you have any Spider-Man book around? It's like, so he wrote me to do that, but he didn't tell me what. And every time he write me, I just say yes to everyone. I don't like passing jobs. It doesn't matter if I don't sleep for 2 or 3 months. Then he told me about that, and I was like, why so casual? It's like Jorge Medina was doing did the first 2 issues, but I guess they do the double shipping, right, and all the stuff. And
when they put out 2 issues a month, one artist can't keep up with that.
Yes, so he told me, oh, you're gonna be the compliment. It wasn't like a feeling as artist, but I had to tell him, no, I will help you with pages because I'm doing super songs right now. So I can't. I wish I could, or you called me 2 months ago and I just don't do all that other thing and do Spider-Man. So yeah, it was, and the thing is, in some of the descriptions, just tell me a lot of Spider-Mans are in there. So I could design some Spider-Mans, just crazy guys doing. So I drew. I didn't tell anyone, but I drew Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the first one, and I drew all the Spider-Mans of the movies in the background, just not doing anything, and some others that I designed. So it was exciting to be doing that, and to draw a big robot with Japanese Spider-Man was fun as well. And do the poses that every time the robot do something, the Spider-Man have to cross his arms or do like that, and so it was funny to watch I just put the YouTube videos of the Japanese Spider-Man. I was just cracking because he's so weird that Spider-Man. But he used his web shooters, but of course it's just a rope. But but it is a funny feeling to be drawing that, and to draw the Inheritors as well. I always when I saw the first Spider thingy,
Spider-Verse, yeah.
The Spider-Verse, yeah.
For those who haven't read the series, the bad guys are these like Victorian space vampires.
Yeah. So when I saw how Olivier Coipel draw them, I was so I tried to emulate that, scare you guys from those guys. I read the first one with Romita Jr., who was with Ezekiel, who had another one who has a totem with Spider-Man, another Spider-Man older one. So when I was reading that, I'm seeing how difficult was for Spider-Man to actually beat this guy. So with 5 of those, we're supposed to be really. So I tried to emulate that. So it was a lot of fun, and I feel really happy working on that. Sadly, I couldn't work more into it. So I did like 1 issue and 10 from another issue, and like 2 or 3 pages for then just helping the artists who were behind in schedule because of the double shipping. Good experience with that.
Staying in the world of Spider-Man, you're wearing the shirt, Sean. So I figure working on Spider-Man for Marvel was something of a passion project, dream come true sort of thing. What was getting the assignment for Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane like?
That was really cool, actually. I had just been writing Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, and it was Avi Arad, actually, I think, was the one who initially said, they're putting out the Spider-Man movies and Mary Jane's really popular. We should have a Mary Jane series. And because I'm apparently the one person who writes teenage drama and romance comics, they came immediately to me, and they knew I loved Spider-Man and asked if I would be interested in writing something like that. And, I was all about it.
You're going to pay me to do that?
Yeah. And so they asked me to, what's your pitch of doing this? And it was really just, okay, well, we're going to do a series. It's from Mary Jane's point of view. There's going to be, we'll try to show Spider-Man in every issue, but not necessarily. And Spider-Man and Peter Parker are, as far as she knows, different characters, different people. And so that's how we're going to play it in the comic. And so it was a great opportunity to get to play with all of the characters and the supervillains, the cheesy supervillains from the 70s that I wanted to put in there, like Big Wheel and Rocket Racer and that kind of stuff. But they're just a side part of it. I don't really like writing the big superhero action sequences. I would honestly rather have artists take the lead on that, because I think that writing those things can be really tedious and can hamstring an artist when I think it's the artist who has the most flexibility and know-how in how to make an action scene really sing, So the fact that I didn't have to do much of that worked really well. And I worked with Takeshi Miyazawa, an amazing Canadian artist who was very good with character work, and that's where I really wanted to focus. But he could also do the Spider-Man action stuff. He also, since then, has worked on Ms. Marvel and Runaways, and so he does that, both sides of that, so very well. And it was just a dream come true to work on that, and I'm very glad to see that they're reprinting it again this summer, just before the next movie.
We have a few minutes left, and I specifically wanted to architect things so that I could loop back around to Val, because you mentioned a particular name. We've mentioned in a couple of panels before now, Stan Lee. You worked with Stan in the offices back in the days when Stan was in the offices, before he headed out to Los Angeles. I don't want to overstate the amount of interaction that you had with Stan, but speaking of Spider-Man, I figure we might as well hear a little bit about what it was like working with the real-life Spider-Man, just without the superpowers. What was he like as a person back in the 70s?
Well, the personality, the persona, the public persona that Stan projected throughout the shows and the television interviews and work, that pretty much is genuinely Stan. Although that was a public persona, but like I said, the offices were small, and Stan's office was like right over in the corner, and you could go in there anytime. And I think the last time I was at a convention where Stan was there, the complexity, the complication that these fans had to go through just to get in a line.
Yeah, I mean, there's a secret service of people between you and Stan Lee.
But I never worked with Stan on any particular book, but the one thing that I only had one significant encounter with Stan, but it was it really told me a lot about myself and about Stan and about the comic book business. And by the way, hearing you guys talk about Spider-Man, and I said that I really didn't get into superheroes, reminds me of what an outlier I've always been in comics. I've always kind of done stuff in the periphery, the monsters, the barbarian figures, and so forth, which I'm happy to do. But I'm just saying that I don't know, I just never got it. I never got the bug for Spider-Man, but no pun intended. But anyway, I had just moved to New York, and I did a painting for the Savage Sword of Conan cover, and I thought it was a pretty good painting. It wasn't my best. Now I look back on it, I'm not crazy about it, but at the time it was the best I could do. And Conan was on a swamp on the back of a horse, and these like swamp men, mutants, were pulling this young girl, as usual, a babe, off the back of the horse. And Conan's trying to control the horse, swing a sword, and keep the girl safe. I turned it into Marvel right when I moved to New York. And that was that. And then the book, about a month later, the book came out. And they had given, they were dissatisfied with the way I had painted Conan, apparently. And rather than give me some notes on it and get it back to me so I could make the changes, they gave it to another illustrator, Earl Norm. And he just painted it right over. And Earl had an entirely different style. He was a good illustrator. He was much older than me and died recently. And I always liked Earl's work, but he was an entirely different style than I did. Plus, I painted in oils, Earl painted in acrylics. And you could just see this acrylic paint on top of oil paint. It was just astonishing.
It was like that touch-up of the painting of Jesus, right?
Yeah. And it was just like astonishing to me that they would not have called me. And I just felt so slighted by this. So I was pretty upset about it. So I went up to the office. Like I said, you could just get up to the office anytime you wanted. I walked up there, walked around the house. Where's Stan? Is Stan in? Yeah, well, there. He stands in there. I just go in his office. Stan's sitting there with his feet on his desk like this. And he says, yes, Val, what can I do for you? I said, Stan. And I gave him the whole spiel that I just described of what happened to my painting. And I really wanted some justice. I was this young Turk artist, and I just come to New York to make my mark, and damn, you were going to do this too. And I pled my case, and Stan just looked at me. So Val, I understand you just moved to New York. How do you like it? And I said, it's very exciting. And where do you live? What side of town are you on? Upper West Side. Oh, that's terrific. And and he just completely diverted me from this bitching I was doing. And he didn't have to confront me. I mean, it struck me as like, what an incredibly adept guy dealing with people. No wonder he can write these stories and run a business, run this company. Because he didn't confront me. He didn't take offense at what I was saying. He didn't tell me to grow up. He didn't make excuses. Well, we didn't know you were here. This is all we could possibly do. He just asked me questions about me. And what do you do when, well, it's about, ask about me, I guess I should, And I talked to Stan a little bit, and then he finally got around to, Val, I'm so sorry about this painting situation. I'm telling you, now that we know you're here, the next time, we're going to call you. Don't worry about that. And I felt, mollified, and I felt, and then about an hour later,
I realized the boss listened to me.
Yeah, and then about an hour later, I realized I was really handled. It was like, get out of my office, and because of that, Stan was indelibly, imprinted in my consciousness, and I'm sure I was in his. And I would say it was 15 years later, we were at a convention in Chicago. And and they had a dinner for Stan and a bunch of Marvel guys, and I walked up to Stan. And I said, Stan, Val, do you remember me? And he said, yes, of course I do, which I'm sure he did, and also Stan was the kind of guy that knew it was really good to remember people's names. And then the final thing, I didn't really have this encounter with Stan, but it was funny because it was supposed to be Stan's last convention. It took place in Dallas about 2 years ago. It turns out it wasn't his last convention. It was
Yeah, the man unretired more times than Barbra Streisand.
Yeah, it was a big rip-off for people, but a friend of mine, his 2 daughters loved Marvel Comics, especially his youngest daughter. She was dressed up as some particular character, and they drove all the way from Albuquerque because they thought, they believed the hype, this was Stan's last convention. They drove all the way from Albuquerque to Dallas, and his youngest daughter, she stood in line, paid the money, wanted to sit in Stan's lap, get an autograph, get a photograph.
Sitting in Stan's lap, not actually for sale.
Yeah, but you had to sit by Stan and get a photograph taken. So she waited in line for all that, and there was somebody up there instructing the kids, now, don't talk to Stan, we don't have time. Don't talk to Stan, we don't have time. And this little girl, and she knew me, and because for her dad, the first thing she did when she sat down was looked up at Stan and said, "Do you know Val Mayerik?" And he goes, "Well, yes, I do." And then they took the picture and she left. So Stan was, the kind of person that he occupied that space in American popular culture because, for a good reason. The guy knew what he was doing, and he had a lot of, he was a visionary. He came up with stuff that we're still celebrating today. So
They tell me we got to wrap up. Was this pretty good? Was this some pretty good Marvel stories you've never heard before and never will again? They'll never leave this room. Never mind. We're videotaping them. I'm kidding. So these guys are all here the rest of the day today. You're here tomorrow, all 3 of you. They have art for sale. They have comics for sale. They have all manner of things for sale. Val and Carlo, are you guys both doing commissions?
yeah.
They're both doing commissions. Your commission lists aren't full yet?
Nope.
Well, shame on you. Fill their commission list, please. Can we hear it one more time for Sean, Carlo, and Val?